Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for. But with a quieter slate, I think it allows us to talk about some interesting conversations that are going on off the field. And one of them that I want to talk about right now is a program that we talk about quite often on this show, and that we've certainly talked about a ton this week, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama, I think you all know by now, on Saturday, took their second loss of the season at LSU in overtime. With it, Alabama really doesn't have much to play for in this season other than pride. Bottom line is they would need LSU to lose their final two regular season SEC games, and Alabama would have to win its final two regular season SEC games just to get to the SEC championship game. Don't think that's going to happen. And even if they get there, they ain't beating Georgia. And so this season has no doubt been a disappointment, but more importantly, I think it speaks to a conversation that we're all kind of asking right now as college football fans. At least I know that I have on this show. What is going on with this program? Can it get fixed? And what is next? How does it get fixed? Or are things going in the wrong direction permanently with Nick Saban at 71? And so these are conversations that we've had on this show. But I will say there was somebody else that made a very interesting comment about the state of Alabama, and that is Greg McElroy, former Alabama quarterback, played at the school. He now hosts a radio show with my buddy Cole Kublik, and also hosts a podcast called Always College Football with Greg McElroy. Well, earlier this week, he was talking about his alma mater, and here is what Greg McElroy had to say. This is the first time I have ever actually been concerned about the future of the program. The first time. I have seen them lose when people have said the dynasty is over. I've seen people back in 2014 say this team will never regain their prowess and their strength. I've seen coach after coach after coach depart for what they might consider to be greener pastures. I've seen everything this program has endured the last several years, and I have never been concerned about whether or not they would be better tomorrow than they were today. I always thought, regardless of where the program was at, that as long as Nick Saban was there, they're going to be just fine. He continued, right now, Alabama feels like it is at a bit of a crossroads. Now, I will say Nick Saban has already responded to the comments. I won't read all of Nick Saban's comments, but he rightly defended his program. He said, are we satisfied with where we are as a team? Absolutely not. But at the same time, sometimes when the standard is so high, there may be some occasion where you don't quite meet the standard and the expectation that everybody has for you. So that's what Nick Saban said in response to Greg McElroy. But let me just say this about Greg McElroy. One, I give him credit. He lives in the state of Alabama, former Alabama player, and I give him credit for saying what he believes to be the truth about the state of his program. Let me also say this, and I don't think it's going to surprise you if you listen to the pod this week. I think Greg McElroy is dead right. And I think the term crossroads is a term that I have used, and it's the perfect term to use to speak about the state of Alabama right now. And it's really interesting, right? First of all, it has been a kind of a weird week because Greg McElroy referenced it. Other people have said in the past that the dynasty is dead, the dynasty is over, really as far back as 2014. That was after Alabama had already won 3 titles under Nick Saban. They lose a couple games. They lose to Auburn. Auburn plays for a title, whatever. Lose to Ole Miss a few times when Hugh Freeze was the head coach at Ole Miss. And people talk about the dynasty being dead. And so I do think there is this kind of hesitation right now. Like there's this hesitation that nobody really wants to kind of go out on a limb and say, like, this program is not right now. And I give credit to anyone, myself, Greg McElroy, anybody that's willing to stick their chin out and say something's not right. We see this in sports sometimes, and I just don't get it, right? Like we see it in sports. Right now, I think Tom Brady's the perfect example. Now, I know he's coming off the game-winning drive, but people are like, oh, you can't bet against Tom Brady. It's like, well, I mean, I've watched the first 8 games of his season. Kind of looks like a 45-year-old going through personal problems, and he doesn't look very good right now. That could change. But right now, I got to base my opinion on Tom Brady based on what I know right now. Same with Patrick Mahomes last year. I didn't understand it.
Nobody would criticize Patrick Mahomes last year. I was like, he's not playing well. Now he rallied, got it, Kansas City back to the AFC Championship game, but there was just this weird thing where like, you can't criticize Patrick Mahomes, bet against him as you want. I'm like, no, he's not very good. Same with Tom Brady and same with Alabama right now. As my radio partner, Arnie Spanier, always says, and I talk about it all the time, he always says, the show is tonight. And what he means by that is we have to base our current opinions off of the information that we have right now. And the information is this Alabama program is trending in the wrong direction. It's not a hot take. It's not a strong opinion. It really is just kind of a fact. It's a fact that we've talked about on this show for 2 years. Listen, I think I was ahead of this last year. I remember talking about this last year saying something's not right. This isn't a vintage Alabama team. It has got to get fixed. And because of the fact that they made it all the way to the national championship game, because of the fact that they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think we kind of dusted under the rug a lot of Alabama's problems, right? Like think about it. Going into the SEC championship game, Alabama was an underdog. Going into the SEC championship game, Alabama was coming off a narrow win against Auburn, obviously a loss in the regular season to Texas A&M. And I think if they just lose that SEC championship game last year, we're asking a lot of these same questions a year ago. But they beat Georgia. They get to the college football playoff where they take care of an undermanned Cincinnati team. And then we kind of give them a pass and we kind of just say, okay, they're going into 2023, 2022. They're going to be awesome. And they haven't been. And this is where I think Greg's commentary holds water. This isn't about one loss or one moment or one game or one this or one that. As I've said many times, this is really a 2-year cycle for Alabama. I brought up the stats the other day. Last 8 road games dating back to last year, they're 5-3 straight up. 5 wins, 3 losses. They're barely 500 on the road. What's even wilder is you think about the close wins that they've had. 1-point win against Texas this year. 2-point win against Florida last year. 4 overtime win against Auburn this year. And so it's funny, right? Because one of the things that Nick Saban said that I didn't get to in his comments about Greg McElroy's comments, he said, look, we lost on the last play of both games in overtime each time. We could be 9-0 right now. That's totally fair. They also won on the last play against Texas A&M and won in the final minute against Texas. So yeah, they could be 9-0. They could also be 3-4. And so this is why the comments are so interesting, because it does feel like they're at a crossroads. This team with this program right now in this second has not been right for 2 years. And where I'd be concerned and why I think the term crossroads is correct, this was supposed to be the team that brought it all back. You have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback coming back that's going to be potentially the number 1 pick in the draft, depending on what you feel about Will Levis, okay? Kidding. Will Levis hype, we'll save that for another day. But probably potentially the number 1 pick in the draft. If he's not the number 1 pick in the draft, you know who might be? His teammate, Will Anderson. And so you bring back basically your entire defense from last year. You bring back a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. You fill out the skill positions through the portal, and things are still trending in the wrong direction. Yeah, I'd be concerned too if I was Greg McElroy or if I was a Bama fan. And I'm not saying Greg McElroy is acting as a fan. I'm just saying I'd be concerned too if I had a personal investment in this program. And the part that I don't think enough people are talking about, maybe it's starting to pick up steam now. What is the path to getting better, right? Because again, this was supposed to be the team. And I think what's especially disappointing about this team, it'd be one thing if it was like 2019 when he just dealt with injuries. If you remember 2019, that was the year Joe Burrow was at LSU. Tua really hurt his ankle right before that game, was basically playing on one ankle in that game. And then he got hurt again later in the year, the hip. It was really unfortunate. It was really scary, but he was out the back half of the year. This ain't it. I know Bryce Young missed a game or two. I think he missed 1 game total. This ain't it. This ain't injuries. This ain't just losing to better teams. Like, right, sometimes even Alabama has lost to better teams. I mean, I could name them, but we don't have to. This ain't it. LSU's in a rebuild. LSU is way ahead of schedule. LSU had 39 scholarship players in their final bowl game, their only bowl game, their bowl game last year against Kansas State. LSU ain't it. LSU ain't a finished product. I don't even think Tennessee is a finished product. I think they're ahead of schedule, but they have holes. We saw it last week against Georgia. And so if Alabama's losing to these teams, what makes us think that it's going to magically turn around? Because here's the bottom line. Look across the SEC. There's a lot of programs that Alabama plays every year or is going to have to get through that are operating at a really high level. LSU appears to have found its head coach in Brian Kelly. I think that guy's going to work at LSU. Ole Miss has been a walkover for the vast majority of Saban's time at Alabama, outside for a year or two when Hugh Freeze had it rolling. They got the right coach if Lane Kiffin stays. Who else? Georgia's obviously got it rolling. Tennessee is going to be tougher going forward than they've ever been. And so I bring it up, and that's not even on the national scale, where Lincoln Riley's building something at USC. We'll see if Mario Cristobal gets it rolling at Miami. Clemson is always going to be a force. Ohio State's always going to be a force. Michigan probably operating at the highest level it ever has. So I bring it up to say, I think Greg McElroy's right. They're at a crossroads. Doesn't mean the dynasty is over. It just means they are at a crossroads, and Nick Saban, I think this will be one of his most interesting off seasons. He's got to replace at least one of the coordinators. I think both. And if you replace both with a new quarterback next year, with a younger roster next year, it is going to look like a much, much different team.